Hello, freak bitches. I might have to spark up a joint for this episode. You just went real deep, real quick.
I was hoping it'd go that way.
Do you want some? Do you smoke the weed?
I could do it for the first time. I'd be willing to try
Ever?
it once.
Well, I don't know if I want to give it to you for the first time. I don't want you to freak out. You don't smoke pot at all?
The truth is, I smoked pot once.
Ever?
It was in first day of college, but I never stopped. So that's really just once.
Oh, I understand. So you smoke pot all the time. So you did it once and you just kept going.
I'd be willing to try it a second time, is what I'm saying.
I understand what you're saying. Okay. So, what has life been like for Scott Adams during this election? You came into you're obviously always well known for being a creator of Dilbert, but along this election cycle, all of a sudden I had people that I was in contact with that were saying, Scott Adams is a Trump supporter. And I was like, what? Scott Adams, the Dilbert guy, is a Trump supporter? Because, everyone assumes you meet someone and they're in the creative business, you're in a creative business. You write a comic strip. You would assume that you would be a left-wing guy, like almost immediately.
Well, I'm neither left nor right. I'm sort of all over the place. My views didn't match, either of the major candidates on anything.
So you're a free thinker.
I like to think I'm right and everybody else is wrong.
But, I would like that too.
No, I'm actually, my larger philosophical grounding is informed by my experience as a hypnotist. I'm not sure if you knew that.
No, I didn't know you were a hypnotist.
So in my 20s, I went to hypnosis school and became an actual trained, certified hypnotist.
Wow.
And one of the things you learn as a hypnotist is that the world is backwards to the way people normally perceive it. So normally you see the world as, hey, 90% of the time people are rational and doing rational things.
Right.
But 10% of the time we just go nuts and we do stupid things, and it's because something happened that sparked it, right? That's the normal view of the world. The hypnotist view of the world is opposite. The hypnotist says that 90% of the time we're completely irrational and we're just making rationalizations for why we did things after the fact. 10% of the time we're rational, but that's only when there's no emotional content to the decision. You're balancing a checkbook or something, trying to pick up, the best route to someplace. And so that's how I see the world. And so when I look at either the Trump supporters or the Clinton supporters, to me, from the hypnotist perspective, and someone who's studied persuasion for decades, I use it in my writing, I see both sides as completely ridiculous. Both of them are grounded in complete absurdities. They're just different.
Yeah.
But nobody knows why they're deciding. The real reasons that people make decisions are fear, identity. They have some aspiration. They've got something they're trying to solve. There's something they're trying to work out. But the reasons we give are usually completely false. And the grounding for this is that if you think about evolution, I assume you believe we evolved.
Yes.
There was no requirement in evolution that we ever understand our environment the way we imagine we do. And here's an example of that. You could believe that you were a monk, you're reincarnated from a 10th century monk.
Like Steven Seagal.
Does he believe that?
Yeah, he's like a Buddha or something.
From an actual...
Yeah, like he actually got it bestowed upon him by some Tibetan character.
All right, so let's use Steven Seagal. So Steven Seagal can be standing in a grocery store next to, let's say, a Muslim who believes that his prophet literally flew to heaven on a winged horse. Those two people don't live the same reality. But they both buy groceries, they both go, they cook it, they live, they survive. So it turns out that understanding your reality at an actual, I really know what is objectively happening and I get it and I've got a mental model that's quite accurate, we don't need any of that. So it would be deeply unlikely that we evolved such a specific skill that's completely unnecessary as far as we can tell. We do need to know that if you run into this wall, your head is going to hurt. So there's some basic stuff. But we're probably all even interpreting that experience differently. So there's no reason to think that the way I think of it is the way you think of it. So I see the world as this big irrational ball, and I use the hypnotist persuader skills to back up and try to deduce, what's really driving things. And when people said I was a Trump supporter, what they meant was, they may have only seen part of what I was talking about. I was writing about his skill as a persuader. And what I mean is that I noticed in him the skills that I've developed over decades for persuasion, but at a higher level than I've ever seen, meaning that he's the most persuasive living human I've ever experienced. And I mean that in terms of actual technique. You know, he's full of technique, and it's all the time. I'll give you some examples of that. First time I noticed it was the very first debate when Megyn Kelly was asking him the question about the insults he had allegedly said to women. Not allegedly, he said them. And this is a setup that any other politician with this setup is totally trapped, because they can either try to like deny they said it and then somebody has a videotape and that doesn't work, or they can say, oh, I didn't mean it. There's almost nothing you can say. You're just trapped. And that would have been the end of his campaign. First debate should have been over. And if you remember, do you remember what he said?
No, I don't.
She said, you said this, and this about women. And he smiled. And he sort of looked at the audience, it looked like, or the camera. And he said, only Rosie O'Donnell. And the audience erupted in laughter, completely unexpected, out of place, inappropriate, provocative. And what I noticed was that Rosie O'Donnell is a visual image that everybody shares, right? You got a picture of her since I say the name. And for his base that he was catering to, it was an unpopular image and one that would just suck all the energy away from the question, which was toxic. And really, you know, you can't touch the question. You just have to suck all the energy into another part of the room and wait for the time to run out. And that's what he did. And it became the headline, blah, blah, blah. And he, certainly it highlighted the things he said about women, maybe more than it would have. But the way he escaped that got my attention. And I thought, that doesn't look normal. All right, that's operating at another level. And so I looked for more examples of it. And you could see it everywhere. And it was especially clear by the time he started saying, well, the other visual things he does is he says, build a wall. And you can just imagine a wall. When he says, we're paying too much ransom to Iran for those soldiers, he says, we paid, $400 million or whatever the number is. He goes, imagine that money piled up. It'd be so much money, it'd fill this room. You can't even imagine that big pile of money. He always goes for the visual, because we know that the visual part of our brain is the dominant part. And if you can get its attention and get it on your message, it talks the rest of your brain into anything you want it to. When he talks about ISIS, he goes visual also. He doesn't say, they are bad people whose religions, has been distorted, to the type of thing you might hear from Hillary Clinton. He says, they put you in cages and they drown you in the cage. They chop your head off. I mean, you can see that. You're playing the movie in your head. So everything he does gets more attention than everything everybody else does, because he puts it into a provocative picture. So that was the first thing I noticed. Then when he got to Jeb Bush, and he needed to defeat Jeb because he was the strongest competitor, so if he couldn't get past him, there was no point. And he went after him strong, and he went after him fast, and he went after him with a low-energy kill shot. That's why I call these linguistic kill shots. It's not just an insult. It's not just a clever nickname. And we saw Clinton try to come up with clever nicknames that had no purchase whatsoever, like Dangerous Donald. It just didn't work. But look at low-energy Jeb. Here's how it's engineered. It's engineered for confirmation bias, meaning that you want the future to make this look like a better nickname every day, and you want it to match his physicality. So before I ever heard low-energy Jeb, I had a good impression of Jeb Bush. Like I thought, when you looked at Jeb Bush, didn't you say to yourself, this guy looks like a cool character? Like,
no.
No, but he looked like he was an in control, calm, reasonable, exactly the person you'd want if the nuclear question came up, if there was some big decision. Jeb Bush isn't going to get excited about it.
He seemed like a competent CEO.
Competent CEO, exactly. And as soon as Trump said low energy, could you see him any other way? He was low energy, and he will always be low energy.
And Lion Ted.
No, Lion Ted.
Lion Ted was beautiful.
Lion Ted, because you knew that because he's a politician, sometime in the next several months, he's going to say stuff that you can say is a lie, whether it is or not. That's
right.
just the
Doesn't
game.
have to.
But more importantly, Ted has a physicality about him that unfortunately he's got beady eyes, and I've said this before, that if you're going to cast a movie, say,
Yeah.
oh, we need a guy who looks dishonest,
Right.
it would be his face.
Right.
Right? And unfortunately, I mean, I don't know if he's actually dishonest. I'm not going to make a judgment. So
Who came up with the Zodiac killer thing? Was that a Trump fan, or was it Trump himself that started saying that Ted was the Zodiac killer?
I think that probably started with a fan. But so the other thing that
was fucking harsh, man. He'd be giving speeches. Are you the Zodiac killer? People would scream it out. Like, imagine having to deal with that.
and did your father kill, somebody?
Yeah. His father was, maybe his dad was the Zodiac killer. Is that what because the Zodiac killer was like the 70s, right? He might not be old enough.
So
Crooked Hillary.
Crooked Hillary, same thing. So,
Crooked Hillary is a brilliant one.
So she wasn't physically, as limber as a young person. So you could imagine her sort of a little bit crooked physically. And you knew that there would be stories coming out in which people could say, well, there's another example of that crookedness.
Did you see, but you thought of that in a physical sense, like the way she looked? All I thought about is corruption. I heard Crooked Hillary. I saw her like with like a burglar's mask on, trying to sneak away with bags that had dollar signs on them. You know? That's what I saw.
If you look at any one of these individually, his nicknames, you could say, well, it's sort of random. He just got lucky. But if you look at them all, they all have that physicality. They all have the priming, so that confirmation bias will kick in. Whatever you see after that will just fit the label because it's the first thing you think of.
Well, he's a performer. You can say Donald Trump is a businessman. He most certainly is. He most certainly is a real estate investor. But he's been a public figure for decades. And when you're a public figure, you're a performer. He's performing all the time. And he likes to win. And so when he's engaging in people, he makes it personal. So he's gotten very good at what's called playing the dozens. You know what playing the dozens is?
Tell us.
It's a insult thing. Like you can, like one guy, like guys in the hood, in the inner cities. It started out as a black term. But it's essentially like a version of a Your Mama contest. Like some guys are way better at Your Mama jokes. They're way better at playing the dozens. They're way better at shitting on other people around them. And it's for the entertainment of each other. It's a huge thing amongst comedians. We shit on each other constantly, left and right. But it's generally encouraged, and we all enjoy it, But when a guy has decades and decades and decades of this, like Donald Trump, at a very high level, because he's known to be a billionaire investor who puts his name on everything.
And still win big, in which I talk about developing systems for succeeding. And one of the systems is to, and you do this too, stack together what I would call ordinary skills until your stack is different than anybody else's. So in my case, I'm not a great artist. I didn't take any writing courses, but I'm pretty good at drawing and I'm pretty good at writing and I'm a little bit funny. So I put them together and I can do a comic strip because it's rare that you get somebody who's, let's say, in the top 10% of 3 different things. But it's not hard to be in the top 10% of things if you're going after them. So if you look at Trump, he wrote a book on negotiating. So he knows business, he knows negotiating, he knows public speaking. He has a sense of humor, a really good one. He's quick on his feet. Now he knows politics, from both the inside and the outside. He knows Twitter. I could probably go on. And you would say, if you looked at any one of those things, he's not the best you've ever seen. He's not the best public speaker, the funniest person, etc. But there aren't many people who can do all of those things in the top 10%.
But as a public speaker, I don't think he's nearly in the top 10%. I think he's, I'm just being honest. I think he has very poor efficiency of words. Like he repeats himself when it's not really important. And when he repeats himself, what I usually see is like someone searching for the next thing to say. You know what I'm saying? Like he'll say, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to be honest with you. Okay? I'm going to be honest with you here. He'll do that in a way that it's not efficient.
It's not efficient, but it's persuasive, and that's why he does it.
Sometimes, but it also...
No, repetition. Repetition is persuasive.
Sometimes, and sometimes it's clunky.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot of times where it's his style to do that, and he's done it before. But even like in delivering lines, you've got to know when to not talk. Like, here's a perfect example. when he said that he called the president of Mexico up, and they had the conversation about the wall, and he said the wall just got 10 foot higher. He's like, yeah, that's what I said. That is what I said. Like, he repeats that stuff. He should have just let it hang. He should have just said the wall just got 10 foot higher. They would have went crazy, and he could have walked back and forth and just sucked it in. But he kept talking. See, that's not the best speaker. Like Obama, I feel, is a way better public speaker. Way more efficient with his words, way better control of the sentences that he speaks, but it's more professional.
I think you're judging on a standard that I probably wouldn't use. So I took the Dale Carnegie course, teaching you how to be a public speaker. And their course taught you zero technique. It was a course on public speaking in which they taught you nothing about technique. The things that you're saying he's doing
Not necessarily technique.
Well, let me just finish this
Okay,
up.
sure, I'm sorry.
What they taught you is just confidence. And if you were happy and confident, you would almost always do well. Even if you make a mistake, you just correct. So he strikes me as the confident Dale Carnegie type of speaker, the person who's selling an emotion. All right, it's an experience. You're not going there really to get information. It's not really, well-crafted jokes you're looking for. You're going there to feel something. And you can't deny that 30,000 people in a stadium with red hats on, they were feeling something. So in terms of delivering an emotion, top 10%.
Interesting. Well, I think that absolutely one thing you could say is he knows how to do the Donald Trump thing. And the Donald Trump thing is very different than the rest of the politicians thing.
Right.
The Donald Trump thing is not humble. The Donald Trump thing will tell you about his past successes and use them to tell you how he's going to be successful in the future. The Donald Trump thing, when confronted with certain things, like the thing about him saying something about Hillary lacking stamina, and then he goes off about having a winning temperament. I have a winning temperament. There's not a lot of people who could do that in that sort of a political form. Like if say, Mitt Romney was running for president, he started saying, I have a winning temperament. They'd be like, oh, Mitt's gone fucking crazy, right? I mean, you remember how Howard Dean got knocked out of the race just for screaming? He just screamed at a rally, and it was over. The wind came out of the balloon.
But you know what Howard Dean did wrong?
What?
He only screamed once.
Ooh,
It's
true.
all about contrast.
Well, he also didn't make fun of it. He should have come on and he should have done something to make fun of it. He should have had a speech where he talked about, so I got a little carried away, folks. Like he hid from it.
It feels like he could have fixed that.
Yes.
Yeah, I had that.
for
I had that feeling
sure.
at the time.
Well, the problem was it was contrary to what he was selling. He was selling this buttoned-up package deal, and in the middle of that package deal is a fucking pro wrestling fan screaming from a suplex. Like Hulk Hogan suplexes the Iron Sheik, and I mean that's what it was like. I mean that's not the guy who you want to have the button.
So if you heard of these studies, and I think this has been replicated and fairly reliable, that if you want to addict somebody to something, let's say this, your show, if you gave them a really good product every time, it actually wouldn't be as addictive as if once in a while it wasn't good and they had to sort of like wait and anticipate, oh, there's that good one again.
Right.
So unpredictable rewards are far more addicting than predictable. Ooh. So Hillary Clinton, who rewards you every time, but it's just about the same, is not going to be nearly as addicting as Donald Trump, who disappoints the fuck out of you. You're like, God, I was just starting to like you. Why did you say that way?
Right.
And then 2 weeks later, he comes out with something, you say, shit, I love you again. And, so he's got that addictive pattern going.
Well, I'll tell you what, once all that grab the pussy stuff got out of the way, he was doing a lot of speeches in the rundown the last few days. And I watched a few of them on television because I've almost felt like, even though I knew I was going to vote, I almost felt like some sort of a spectator. Like this cannot possibly be real, to speak to your software simulation idea in the beginning that a lot of people share, by the way. It's not just crazy Scott Adams and me, but there's a lot of folks out there that think that we're living in a simulation, right? But as he would give these speeches, and there were some of the speeches he gave where there was these moments, and you're like, if someone could tell that guy to keep it at 7, like where he's at right there, and talk like that always, and avoid all the crazy shit. But man, the crazy shit is what you get. Like that's the thing about people like Trump or like any powerful super dominator type character like that. You're going to have some flaws, a lot of them.
Look what he kept saying all the time. He was always saying he was the energy guy, guy, look at my crowds. The other one has no stamina. This one's, low energy. He knew the facts didn't matter. He knew that policy didn't matter. And by the end, I think everybody agrees they didn't. I mean, by election day, not a lot of people were saying, well, I sure like that TPP stand. I mean, nothing like that was happening.
There was no issues. No issues.
It just came down to which one you hated the more.